So we're going to move to the next part of our service here in just a second. But I sure am glad not to have an itinerary or a bulletin or anything else that feels like a shackle. Because there's something I want to share with you. Turn to Acts 19. I promise I'm not going to steal from you, Lord. I can't. I don't know what she's preaching about. Isn't that good? I figure she came from Malaysia. Jesus sent her. And that's good enough for me. Somebody read out loud, starting in 19 verse 8 and read down through 12.
Paul entered the synagogue and spoke boldly there for 3 months, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. But some of them became obstinate. They refused to believe and publicly maligned the way. So Paul left them. He took the disciples with him and had discussions daily in the lecture hall of Tyrannus.
Keep going.
This went on for 2 years, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. God did extraordinary miracles through Paul, so that even handkerchiefs and aprons that had touched him were taken to the sick, and their illnesses were cured, and the evil spirits left them.
The Ephesus, spiritual Ephesus, friends. In this place, Paul turned it so upside down that something worth 50,000 days' wages, 50,000 drachmas, a drachma being a day's wage, was burned. He turned it so upside down for Jesus that the whole city came out and chanted in a riot for 2 hours. He turned it so upside down that even people without Jesus were trying to imitate the things that he was doing in Jesus. He turned it so upside down that you can use a word like extraordinary miracle, as if there's such a thing as an ordinary miracle. Oh, that we would know the power of God. Can you imagine that miracles were so commonplace? What we were talking about was not miracles, but extraordinary miracles. He wasn't welcome in a synagogue, so he rented a hall. They met in a hall for 2 years. Some people would take that as a real slight. He took it as an opportunity. And from Ephesus, he wrote things like, "You have been blessed with every spiritual blessing." From Ephesus, he wrote things like, "You are seated in heavenly realms." He wrote things like Ephesians 6, "Our battle is not against flesh and blood." So I have a message for our church. We're in a time of warfare. There's no question. I can feel things pulling and pushing. All of the leaders have mentioned, we've all had some sleepless nights. My wife woke up yesterday at 2 o'clock in the morning shouting in other tongues. A demonic dream, difficult thing, and fought through it. We were built for contention. These are the times you see extraordinary miracles. If you feel pushed with thoughts that do not line up with the Word of God, push back. You hear me? If you have divisive thoughts, we are a family. Push back. Right? The people in this room love you. We are missing you if you are not here. Because God called us to spur one another on towards good deeds. I want to tell you why I think we've caught the attention of the enemy. Okay? More than 40% of every dollar that has come in this ministry in the first 5.5 months went to missions.
Amen.
I want you to hear that. Think about that. Don't think about it as some religious institution somewhere else, because we're not. This grew from our living room. So think about it like it was your budget. If out of every dollar that came in your house, more than 40% of that dollar went overseas. Guys, it was over $63,000 before June. That does not include India. That does not include Honduras. That does not include Peru. It doesn't include the speakers that we've had since then. Doesn't include any of those things. And you know what? I think we can go further, because we serve a God who will do extraordinary miracles. If we can get our eyes off of the selfish, how do we get blessed, and on to the sacrificial, we have paved the way for the extraordinary. I don't much care whether we meet in that field, whether we cram into a living room, or whether we have to rent more buildings. Makes no difference to me. My entire goal is that we touch the world for the gospel.
Amen.
That's the entire goal. I spent more than 160 hours on airplanes this year. More than 20 countries. Now, that's an easy statistic to spit out there. But my ankles swell like a pregnant woman. There's a reason we are on a mandate to do this. We're on a mandate because we received it from the Lord. So I'm asking you with all of your heart to pitch into everything that's going on in this ministry. It is not some organization. This is a family. And at the end of the day, there is no headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. There is no long list of people that are unseen somewhere. It is what you made it, right here. But I am so proud of what you have made it, right? There was a time we could not gather 3 people to hear us speak. There wasn't. But Jesus is doing something here. And He's increasing our influence because we have the right message. And we're not the only ones with the right message. You're going to hear the right message from Malaysia. You're going to hear it Sunday from Peru. You heard it a couple weeks ago from Sri Lanka. Do you not feel blessed?
Yes.
We have a schedule that looks like a mega church, and we model ourselves after a mini church pastor named Jesus. Right? I could care less about rich and famous, but I care everything about nameless servants around the world. This is where our heart is. I want you to get behind it. Right? I want you with all of your heart to strive for it. Because this is not a holy place for a holy fee on a holy day where you come to be entertained. This is a place where the ordinary human beings become extraordinary. And you go do extraordinary things for your God in this world. And we see it. We see it happening at abortion clinics. We see it happening everywhere. You're branching out, and we're just beginning. I think we can turn this thing upside down just like Paul did Ephesus. Right? I'm not convinced Sugar Land's dead. I'm not convinced this international city has no hope. In fact, I'm beginning to believe that we hold the key in our hands to change it. Amen?
Amen.
Y'all want to welcome our speaker up here?
Yeah.
Come on up here, Miss Gloria. Get the speaker intimidate the stage. I didn't ask her anything except if she wanted a mic, you know? Oh, hey, sound booth, which mic should we use? That sounds so official, doesn't it sound good?
And use John's mic.
Did y'all know John and Joy live with me? I live with John and Joy. And from time to time, people like Susan have lived with us. People like David have lived with us. Cody lived with us. Brandon lived with us. The church becomes a powerful thing when nothing belongs to you anymore. Everything belongs to Jesus. Right?
Yes.
Come on. What do you think you have in your life that would bless somebody else on the other side of the world? I just encourage you to begin thinking like that. We're about to go to Honduras. We're sitting around scraping together our pennies thinking about what it is that we need. We don't need money. We need sacrificial lives. We need anything that you could do that you can get no glory for, but Jesus could receive glory for. Isn't that good?
Yes.
You know, the missionary there hadn't asked for a single thing from us except come. I mean, church, that's something you ought to be able to get behind. Hey, let's pray for her because I'm going to preach otherwise. JJ, stand up and pray for her, man of God.
Jesus, thank you for the word, God, that is freely given to us, God, and I pray that we would be open to receive it tonight, God. I pray that our hearts would be stirred, God, to advance your kingdom, God, not our own agendas, God, not our own selfishness, but Lord, pray that our lives, our hearts, our minds, our bodies would be laid down as a living sacrifice, God, that your kingdom may go forth. God, I pray your blessing upon the speaker tonight, upon Gloria, God, let her words be yours. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen, amen. I'm going to preach this way, girl. Hey, you preach as long as you want to about whatever you want to, and just be obedient to the Lord, okay?
Okay. Hi, church.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Well, I've been to 31 states, and I've never been to Texas. And this is my first time to Texas. And my first time to Texas, I've spent the most time in your church. So that should say something, right?
Amen.
I don't know why Texas was never a place I came. I guess the weather was as hot as Malaysia, so I like the snow and when it really snows. Like I've been to Alaska,
Yes.
so that's the kind I like.
Love it.
Let me tell you a little bit about Malaysia. Have any of you been to Malaysia? I know one. Well, we have the best food next to jambalaya and gumbo.
Oh.
That should say something, right? Okay, Malaysia is in Southeast Asia. It's on, let me see, it's south of Thailand, north of Singapore. And we have about 28 million people. And there are three main ethnic groups. Then there are others, small ethnic groups. There's the Malay, the Chinese, which makes up 24.6%. And the Indian population that makes up 7.1%. And the Christians Christianity is only 10% in Malaysia. But with that 10%, after coming to America, I've been here 4 years and I've traveled quite a bit. After coming to America, I would say that 10%, if you light a fire, it'll catch on fire. It's, really serious Christians.
Amen.
And I don't say this to offend, but a lot of American churches, you have more pews than people, and it's, I feel like you need to evangelize in the church. not your church, but a lot of places are like that. In Malaysia, the three main religions, or there are more, Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, Sikhism. So there are plenty. We have seen it all. Things that you see probably in different places that you go, all the temples, the shrines, the just whatever, whatever you've seen it all, they've seen it in Malaysia. I noticed in America people homeschool a lot, and in Malaysia that wasn't allowed till the last 5 years, maybe 5-6 years. Homeschooling wasn't popular, but what the church did was they really trained, the children's church and the youth ministry really trained the young people. We were, I think, being young, we were trained that we will be the only Jesus our friends will see. We will be the only Bible our schoolmates will read. So we were trained from, every Sunday you would go and live right the rest of the week. And a lot of the schools in Malaysia were built by the early missionaries. And so although later Islam came in and Muslim leaders took over, the missionaries actually have a long-standing agreement with the schools that there has to be if the schools were started by missionaries, there has to be a Christian fellowship in the school, and you cannot close it down. They have closed those school hours, and they closed, and Christians gathered together. They did prayer walks, they did prayer rallies around the principal's house every single day. They fasted, they prayed, and they got it reinstated back. They found long-standing documents that said the school came with this Christian fellowship and you cannot shut it down. So every morning the Muslims will pray, but the Christians were allowed to have worship service once a week. The Christians were allowed to pray in school, and the young people were just so passionate for God. And I think the highest rate for salvation is when kids are in school, because the teenagers were winning teenagers. Until today, it's still going on. The highest rate for salvation is when they are in schools.
Amen.
And they pay a high price because they still live at home with their parents, and religion is so tied to family values. So when you're saying no to the religion that your family believes in, it's almost like saying no to them. And they are persecuted, they are, it's a tough price they pay for saying yes to Jesus. In fact, when I was thinking about my walk with God, I was blessed to be raised in church, in a Christian family. My parents didn't always live it, but I've had good mentors, good leaders to walk me through. I've got good grandparents, good relatives that really enforced the practice, to live my life right. But when I was 13, this 16-year-old girl stopped me in school, and she was considering me to serve on board with the Christian fellowship, but she wanted me to be baptized with the Holy Spirit. And she came in school. This is a Muslim school. She pulled me aside. She's like, "We're going to pray for you today, and you're going to speak in tongues." And today looking back, I'm like, she was 16, and the boldness she had to do it, and she did it. She got a few people together. We prayed. They had their guitar going on. They were worshiping. And I was baptized in school by a 16-year-old girl. So people were just so passionate. It was a country where, when I look back, they were just so on fire, so passionate. And so I was in Malaysia. I taught I worked with a lot of internationals. I worked at different places. I taught ESL, English as a second language. And I've always, because of my upbringing wherever you are, that's your mission field. That's something I've always carried with me.
Amen.
And so when I taught ESL in Malaysia, my classroom was my mission field.
Amen.
And I remember having students from different countries. Every Sunday they came to church with me. My students, I had students from Iran, from Japan and Korea, and they would just, just come to church with me. And it was just such a fruitful experience seeing God just work in their lives. And 4.5 years ago, 21st April, I left, I came to the US. And little did I think, I was only coming for a year. I told my family bye. I told my boyfriend then bye. I'm coming for a year to America. I was going to do the au pair program. It's an exchange program where you live with an American family and you provide childcare. And, I just wanted to see the US for 1 year, and then go back, get married, and, and live life. So I left for a year, or so I thought. And my year has been 4 years and counting. So, but I'm glad God's plans are not my plans. I'm glad He scripts the story of my life.
Yeah.
So I came to the US. I landed with a single mom in Cleveland, Ohio. And, it's a small little town. And I stayed there for 4 years. For 4 months. I landed in Cleveland. I stayed there for 4 months. And in that 4 months, every time when God's going to do something great, there's bound to be opposition. I remember just coming to the US, within a month, I remember just falling sick and, I think I spent the whole 4 months just in different medical hospitals in Cleveland. Thank goodness they have one of the world's best, the country's best. But there was a whole nother testimony where God just came through, God healed, God just took care of that need. But in Cleveland, and right after that in Cleveland, my host mom lost a job and I had to move to a different family. And, I was very prayerful about it. Okay, God, where next? I wanted to go where you want me to go, so where next? And I had about 18 families contact me. But the one that stood out was a single dad with 3 boys. And I'm like, what do I tell my family? What do I tell my boyfriend? I'm going to be the only girl in the house, But God was so clear that there was no way. I just knew. I asked them for pictures. I asked them, when they sent pictures, that was the only family that just, I don't know, I just knew and knew that it was God. So I shared with them, and I was surprised, no objections. They prayed. God spoke to them individually. They said, yeah, go. I had a mentor in Cleveland. It was, Cleveland was great. It was great campus ministry that I was involved in, great friends, great church. But God shut the doors. God said, you're going here. And in Cleveland, there was 60 families, and I couldn't find. Whereas this, they put you in small groups. And in Chicago, there were only 10 families, and that was where God sent me. So anyway, before I get there, they will tell me the youngest boy, his name is Billy, the youngest boy was diagnosed with Asperger's, a spectrum of autism, and he didn't speak. So they told me, well, you can make it around, but this is it. The youngest boy didn't speak much. He just started speaking a few words. And the reason was because his mom was pregnant with him, and she had cancer. So she started going for chemo while she was pregnant with him. Doctors told her to abort. Her husband told her to abort. Friends, family, neighbors, everybody who could speak told her to abort. But she was Catholic, but she really knew her God through her journals. Later I'll find out. And she said no, she's going to keep this baby, and it was God's will, whether he takes the life or not. She's going to keep this baby. She fought with everything in her to keep the child. And so I get there, but God spoke, so I'm going. But there were days I remember thinking, God, I have no experience with special needs. On my own flesh, this was not the family I would have picked. I'll run the other way. I'll be a Jonah and run the opposite direction, So when it's God. And 4 months after I got there, within 4 months, they gave me this big folder of all the autism therapy, and this is what you do, that is what you do. All I did was just pray and talk to him every day. Within 4 months, now you can't get him to shut up. He just talks and talks and talks, and now he's 9, and there's no sign of autism. Nothing. And it's only Jesus. There's only Jesus. And every time when someone tells me, well, maybe we should abort because, and I remember writing, I read a lot of blogs, and when people are arguing about pro-life, well, maybe because of cancer this is allowed. I always tell them, this boy is a living, walking miracle of a God that lives. Amen. Because she chose to honor God. Amen. The mom actually lived after he was born. She lived for 4 years, and then the cancer came back, and it was in her brains, and then this time she didn't make it. And the other neat thing is, later I'll find out, just before I left, her friend will come by, and the friend will tell me the mom actually prayed God will send someone to work with him for 4 years. So that he would have some form of stability. And the friend didn't believe. She was like, who would come to a house with 3 boys, a single dad, and stay for 4 years? She thought, this lady's crazy. And even the au pair program, you can only stay 2 years. So the friend didn't say anything, but when she saw me at close to the end of my 4 years, she was like, you're still here? This woman prayed. And I laughed at her. I thought, she was fake, this won't happen. But I was just thinking, she passed away, but her prayers didn't die.
Amen.
God just orchestrated every detail. Because if I were to come from Malaysia, there was no way I would have chosen that family. I just knew Cleveland had to happen because, God had to. That's how God was. The only way he was going to get my attention. And moving to Chicago was rough. Moving to Chicago, it's just a cold city. People were nice, but the city was nice, but people were cold. People were, I don't know. And church was dry. You can ask Joellen and Charlie. It was a rough beginning. It was just, we felt like we had to evangelize in the church. The church needed Jesus more than the world, And if I were to sum up my years in the U.S., I would say it's to run after God with reckless abandonment.
Amen.
With blind faith, trust, and obedience. And there's always a price to pay, But it's saying yes over and over, and you'll really see God work. So I just did day-to-day life. I was just a babysitter. You'll think, well, mom staying home, just watching kids, it's boring, play dates. But I really prayed, God, let this be my mission field, and you show me how to do this. I mean, it's just babysitting, it wasn't fun. But it was just so amazing. There were 10 girls in that little suburb I was in, from all 10 au pairs. And by the end that I left, all 10 will hear the gospel. All 10 will come to know Christ one way or another. Some really made significant changes. Some have gone home where their families have gotten saved. And I'll just share some with you. There was this girl, she was from Switzerland. And she was wild. I mean, the wild of the wild lot, She just had more men in her life than you can count in a week. She just partied a lot. And I grew up sheltered. So I grew up in the church. I grew up sheltered. So it was too much. But I didn't have friends in church. So during the day, we would spend time. We'll have play dates. The kids played together. We would talk. But God really gave me no, not in the beginning. So I'll bring her to church. And every time worship came on, she was a mess. She was just in tears. But she was so hard that she was like, I'm fine, it's okay, I'm okay. She would not admit God was working in her life. And I was stubborn. I just felt, God, I'll send other people to talk to her. I'm not talking to her. I just felt, her mess was too much for me to deal with. And every week, she would come. She'll just come. Curiously, she'll come. And every week she'll be in tears. But I wouldn't talk to her. I'll pray God work in her. And other people were making plans to talk to her. So I was like, okay, God, I brought her. Other people have to be. But I remember one day God speaking to me through the woman at the well, where he, and it really jumped up on me, where he stopped for the lady at the well. He crossed racial barrier, gender barrier, culture barrier, and he stopped for her. And if he could stop for her, then I had no excuse.
Amen.
And, and when I started working with her, I just started sharing with her and praying with her. And then God sent Joellen and Charlie, and they took off with her. So it was just so beautiful because her life was totally transformed. And then she made peace with her father after that. It was just so beautiful to see God just work in her life. And then later along the road came another Mexican girl. And she was just the sweetest little thing, during the day. But at night, she was also a crazy party girl. Like I've never, just really crazy party. A lot of men. She drank more alcohol than she did water. She just, I've never seen anything like that. And all 10 were all the same. So they all clicked together, and I was the only one that was, not part of the crowd. So anyway, but this was my mission field. This was what I prayed for. This was what God gave me. So you deal with it, And her testimony was so beautiful. I think she went to a church, and in Chicago, it's hard to find a church. We never found a church that spoke in tongues. She actually went to a church that spoke in tongues.
Wow.
And she'll go to church. She'll go to church with us. She'll party all day on Saturday. We went for a Sunday evening service. And so she'll go to church. For the whole year she went to church, nothing made sense to her. Nothing clicked. But one day a South African girl will actually invite her to church, and she would go to church, and then the girl will ask her, so how do you like my church? And she's like, well, it's good, but why do they speak South African if they're in America? And she'll actually tell them, no, she'll explain to her they were speaking in tongues, and this girl was so curious. So, we led her to the Bible, we showed her, then we of course sent her to Joellen and Charlie, and they explained some more, and throughout the week we met, we explained to her, and she just that was the beginning where things began to click with her, because she just got so hungry for God, that she was just reading the Bible, she read every missionary story she could get her hands, and get a hold of. She was just so on fire for God. And she accepted Christ shortly right after. And as soon as she accepted Christ, she went on a 3-day fast. Her grandmother was really sick in Mexico, and she wanted to pray. She wanted God to spare her grandmother. She went on a 3-day full fast. And mind you, she was only a 2-month Christian. She went 3 days full fast. She prayed that, God, if you would spare my grandmother, I want to go back and tell her Jesus changed my life. And her friends thought she was, her host family gave her the alcohol. So they were like, are you in some cult? Are you okay? They kept offering her alcohol. They didn't know why she was going for Bible study and not going to the clubs. So it was just, people around her found it hard to adjust to her. So she went on a full fast, and God will keep, her grandmother was getting really sick, but God will keep her alive. December 28th, and her mom was really unhappy that she was a Christian. Her mom felt, she was a single mother, her mother felt, if I have financial problems, I want real answers, don't tell me to pray. But December 28th, she would go back. She was going back to Mexico for 10 days. The night before we meet, we pray. Before she goes home, we are praying because her friends are waiting for this party girl to come back. She's no more that girl. She gets to O'Hare Airport, and they tell her she cannot leave. Her passport expired. Oh. So she surrenders her passport, and they say no. It expired in September. This is December 28th. So there's no way she could leave the airport, and so she calls me just crying and just like my passport expired. And the only thing I remember praying was Don Moen's song, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. I was just like, God, this is a 2-month Christian. She fasted 3 days. You better do something, I cannot imagine. I just couldn't imagine driving this crying girl home when, she really prayed. She really believed. She really fasted. And so we are praying on the phone. And then this woman comes up to her and she asks her, what's wrong? She explains. And then the woman takes her to the computer, and her name is no more on the passenger list. That's been removed. And so the woman's like, I don't know what I can do with you, but let me see. She walks in. 10 minutes later, the woman comes back, a boarding pass in hand. But before that, she's like, can you call my mom in Mexico, tell her don't leave because of the drug war? I don't speak Spanish. The mom doesn't speak English. There's no way I could talk to her mother. And her mom was already 3 hours away to the airport. Wow. So it was just so much craziness. It was so much better if God just solved it. So anyway, so we, 10 minutes later, this woman comes out, the boarding pass in hand, and the woman takes her by the hand, checks her bags and both her bags in for free, walks her to the gate. She doesn't need to do any explanation. The woman explains everything. This is O'Hare. I mean, you're not talking some small, airport in the boonies. This is O'Hare International Airport. This doesn't happen. So she walks her through security, explains everything. And at the gate, the woman tells her, this is as far as I can come with you. Just pray in Houston. They don't see your passport. And, in Houston. And then she calls me, what God did? And she was so excited on the other end. And then she gets to Houston and she's praying. She's like, I'm going to pray God blinds their eyes, like how he blinds the eyes of the people in China when they smuggle Bibles in. And I'm like, she read enough, She's taking God at his word. And she gets to Houston and she said they check everyone's when it came to her, they just waved her in. Nothing else, no questions asked, they just waved her in. So she would get to Mexico with no, with no passport. Because the passport was expired, but that was the beginning of her mother's salvation. Because her mother knew there was no way her daughter could have been on that flight if it wasn't for Jesus. So in that 10 days, her mom will get saved, and they spend the best time just praying, reading the Bible. It was just so beautiful to see. And then she was also discipled by Joellen and Charlie. It was just really beautiful how God brought us together, because I was just a babysitter. Doing regular babysitter stuff, just everyday play dates, whatever. Pick kids up from school, drive them to soccer. But in between, and we were just reading, having Bible studies, during the day, in between while kids were in school, at night we wear the browns. Every day, every night we wear the browns to eat, and then of course they take out their Bibles. There was just no way. They would cook, but make sure you read the Bible before you walked out the door. So, you know, it was just really beautiful what God did in Chicago. And as my year ended, as my year was coming to a close, I was like, well, you know, I think I need to go back. I stayed 1 year and then I extended 1 more year because of that little boy. So I'm like, God, I need to go back. I was preparing to go back, but the little boy, every night he prayed, Jesus, give Gloria one more Christmas with me. Every night. And I just couldn't walk out. You know, how do you walk out when, you know, he was 6 and he was praying every night, Jesus, give Gloria one more Christmas with me. And I was like, I was trying to explain, it doesn't work like that. You cannot tell the government, you know, there's no way. There was just no way. And I just got engaged a few months ago because I was like, well, I'm going home, you know. But every night he would pray, and then my fiance then knew, you know, he met the family, he has come for a visit, and he was like, you know, I think you've got to stay. you can't leave, you know, that I think you've just got to stay, because he was really, this little boy was just, you know, there are days he'll pray, I mean, he prayed every day, Jesus, give Gloria one more Christmas with me, but there were days he was just so upset, you're going to leave me like my mama left me, or I'm going to heaven tomorrow, I need to bring her back, she's gone too long. And, you know, it just broke your heart, you know, he didn't understand. So I'm like, okay, Billy, if you want me to stay, you got to pray, you know, because there's no way I'm going to afford school. There's only way for me to stay is to go to school, and there's no way I could afford. Jesus will do it. It's okay, we'll pray, you know. And he was like, we'll pray, okay. So I applied for school, and my agreement with God, I said, God, I want to do it, but I want to do it in 1 year. You've got to help me do it in 1 year. I don't know where finances is going to come through. You've got to do it, you know, because I traveled the most times I was here, so I didn't have much savings. I just traveled everywhere. I went to see every state I could see. And this little boy, he really would pray. And I applied for school, so the first time I was like, okay, but let me try. For summer, I'll just take 1 class. I'll see how God's going to pay this bill. And we get into, you know, I went to see my faculty advisor. He came along. Just as we walked out her door, I said, you know, Billy, this is my school. Do you like it? Oh, your school, your university, we need to pray here. This boy that the doctor said aboard said, we need to pray. And he literally laid hands on the bricks of the school, on the walls, and he prayed the prayer. I was in complete tears. He prayed, Jesus, you make her great here. You make sure her visa comes through. You make sure you give her the money for her school, give her good friends, good teachers. Okay, you understand God? You know? And I mean, he just took God at his word. You know, there was no qualms. He just did it like a simple childlike faith. And then he prayed me through every semester because, you know, as an international, you pay double the rate locals pay. He prayed me through 20,000 in 1 year, and I never saw the amount in my bank account. Every semester there was enough to pay my school fees. Every semester God just did it. And it was also a year I gave the most to missions. It was also the year I gave the most to orphans, because, you know, it was a year where God really challenged me, where I was reading from the Old Testament, from Deuteronomy, Leviticus, where he says to care for the orphans, the aliens, and the widows. Amen. Over and over. It's not, you know, it's not an option, it's a command. And I just took it. I just, you know, okay, if this is what you want me to do, you know. And it was a year that he just opened my whole world into just understanding. I understood his heart for missions, but he really just opened my eyes to orphan ministry. And every time there were times when, you know, I just felt led to give to a ministry, and the next thing I'll have enough money that at the end of that week to pay my school fees. And, you know, that was just a year where I just saw that you can never outgive God. It was a year I saw that how to just run after him with reckless abandonment, where you lay everything down. You lay, you know, your family down, your fiance down, everything, and just run after God. If this is the road he calls you to walk, you walk. And so when I finished school, and it was also in school, it was just beautiful to see. I've got favors with my professors that none of the other students had. It was just really beautiful. That, in fact, in March I went back and I was sitting with my dean, and I was telling her what I was doing with internationals, and she's from Burundi, and she suffered the Hutu-Tutsi war, if you're aware of the Hutus and the Tutsis in Burundi, and she came out of that. And she used to, in her papers, she always used to write, thank you, Jesus, for the New Testament. I would always see it, And I never understood it. So one day when I asked her, she said, I cannot accept the Old Testament because of the war, and I come from I saw my father murdered, and I don't understand why God allows it. So, you know, and you just heard, I often prayed for her. But this time when I went to tell her how I was working with internationals, and I was telling her about God's heart to care for the orphans, the aliens, and the widows. And the aliens is international, that's God's heart, you know, and he said, don't mistreat an alien because you were aliens in Egypt. And I was just sharing with her the whole, every international, how God's heart is to care for every international in the Bible. And I walked her through from Genesis onwards, all the internationals, and that's his heart. And she just had tears in her eyes, and she said, I never saw my Bible that way. So, you know, when I was in school, God really gave me favor with different professors, and they all knew my story. They all knew this girl had no scholarship. Somehow her money, every semester, God's paying her bills. They all knew because I just said no. And every semester, I was the one traveling. I was the one, you know, doing skydiving and jumping off planes. And they just knew, you know, they were just waiting to see. The other internationals, the other girls waited to see. So really, God going to pay this bill, you know, and every semester they waited, and God always did it. And they knew times when I said, oh, you know, I think I need to give. And they're like, you're giving, but you're saving for school. And I'm like, you know, I'll see how God does it. And he never faulted. Amen. And as soon as my year in school ended, I still didn't feel like God wanted me to leave. It was, you know, I never had the peace to leave. As much as in my flesh I wanted to go back, I just never had the peace to leave. And so I put my resume out there. As an international, you're allowed to work in the US for 1 year. And I just felt, you know what, I'm going to lay my fleece out there. Americans can't find a job, let me see if I get a job, you know. And I was teaching ESL, so I doubted it. I just thought, let me try, I'll send my resumes out there, but let me see. If nothing comes up, because you need to find a job in your field within 3 months, or you got to leave the country. And I was happy to go back. But I had 2 different schools contact me, and I don't know how, I did not send them my resume. These 2 schools will get it from somebody else, and they will contact me to say, would you come for an interview? And it was Ohio State and Wright State in Dayton. So I went to Wright State in Dayton for an interview. It really, somehow it just settled in my spirit, and God really spoke to me. I remember I was just driving there, and one day God would really speak to me. And I was praying, God, you know, are you sure this is the school? Are you sure this is where, did I hear you right? Is this where you want me? And I was at a traffic light, and God would speak to me, read the sign, and I read Wright State. Then again, you know, read the sign, I read Wright State. Okay, by the 3rd time, read the sign. And by the 3rd time, I'm like, God, don't you think I know where I am? You know, I work here. And the 3rd time, I did not see the W. It was Wright State. Like, you know, it just silenced every doubt that, you know, you're in the right place. It wasn't, you know, University of Dayton. It wasn't any other school. It was Wright State. Don't go anywhere, just Wright State. And I remember Ohio State offering, they counter-offered that offer, and they were offering 1,000 more. But where I went, I wanted that to be my mission field. In Ohio State, they had a lot of work among international students, and Wright State, in Dayton area, there was nothing. And so, you know, I prayed about it. I had no peace about Ohio State, and I remember I remember my interviewer telling me, from an employer's perspective, I want you in my organization. But if I were to think of what's best for you, I think you would do better in Dayton. And you know, so I was surprised that he actually said it, and I just knew, as soon as, you know, I went in for the interview, I walked out, I just knew this is not for me. This is really not for me. And I took a much lower paying job because I just felt I was called to Dayton. There was no work among internationals. And what I do in Dayton, a lot of the internationals are from Muslim countries. And so having come from Malaysia, which is a Muslim country, I did 12 years of Islamic studies. So I just knew, you know, I'll be able to minister better, reach out to international. They're right here, they're in your classrooms, you know. So I've really seen God just move and work and just take me on an incredible journey of faith, trust, obedience, even when it made no sense. You know, on my own, I would never go to a home with a single father. On my own, I would never go to and teach in the boonies. I'm a city girl. So, you know, Dayton is just boonies and cornfields and, you know, you give me the city. I'm more afraid in the cornfields than anywhere else. But really, I've seen God work like never before. And it's also been a year where I've really seen the father heart of God. especially with working with kids, I've seen the way God loves and loves unconditionally. We all come with our messes, and He doesn't expect us to be perfect, but how He just loves and loves us unconditionally. And and in Malachi 3:10, where He says, "Test me in this," and that's the only time in Scripture He tells us, "Test me in this." No other times in Scripture, not that I know, where He tells you. But in Malachi, He says, when you give your tithe and you bring your offering, that's the only time He says, "Test me in this, whether I'll give you back." And I have really seen it work for my life. I've seen it. I remember my first car. I was living with my host family. None of them were Christians. The mom was Catholic, and she knew her God through her journals, but nothing. The dad didn't practice it. The older two kids didn't. But I remember one day I'll wake up that morning, and God will really impress in my heart to give to an orphan online. I was following the orphan for a while. I was giving, for someone's birthday, I'm going to give you gifts through giving to an orphan. And God will really impress in my heart to give it to this orphan. And 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. And before I gave, I was like, God, you sure? I'm saving, right? To move to Ohio. But 10 minutes later, my host dad will come in, and he'll say, "The minivan that you drive is yours. I'm signing the title over," and that was the car the wife drove. And this was a non-Christian, where God used him to bless me. He's like, "You can take it. The car is yours." And that was my first car. To use a non-Christian to bless. And then I was moving to Ohio. That whole time I really saw every time God was faithful. Then there was another time before Thanksgiving, and this girl was going, I knew this girl from church going to India. And I was babysitting 2 days in a row, and I had all my cash with me. And I remember so strongly feeling the urge, give her your cash. And I'm like, all of it, God? Like, really? All of it? And I was battling in my head, like, all of it. So I finally got the envelope, and I wrote it to Heather for India. I'm not arguing. I'm just going to do it. 2 weeks later, so I gave her, I just gave her, no questions asked. 2 weeks later, for Thanksgiving, one of their aunts come to see me, and she's like, "Can you stop by my house, for the weekend?" And I did. I went by to her place, and she had a card in front of her, and she said, "I cannot put a price tag to what you've done for the boys. I know this is something my sister would want you to have." And, she pushed the card over. So I left, I took it, I thanked her, I walked out, I wasn't expecting anything. She said something small. I get to church and I open it, and it was a 4-figure check. What I put in that offering bag was nothing compared to what she gave me. So over and over, I've just seen the faithfulness of God in a way I've never seen, like ridiculous. Because, I'm an international, I came with really nothing. I came, God paid my school, God did this, God did that, everything. There are times the other girls would laugh. They would be like, "It only happens to Gloria." You would see her car fixed for free. You would see her oil change for free. You would see, just... And the girls cannot help but say, only Gloria and her God, this will work. And they've often, they always have seen God work, and it's just really beautiful. And with what I'm doing with internationals, I'll share a little bit about what I'm working with internationals in Dayton. Can I have the slides? This is the ministry I work with. It's international friendships. And next one, John. And if you see here, click on it. There are 2 biblical strategies where God's people go to the world, and it's the Great Commission from Matthew 12, 18, 19, and 20, where we are called to go into all nations. And then the world comes to God's people in Acts 2, 5, and 41. Let me read that to you. Now they were staying in Jerusalem, God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. So this is where the world comes to church. And can I see the next slide, please? And this is the covenant God gave Abraham in Genesis 12, where He says, "I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." So this And in Revelations chapter 5 verse 9, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude, and no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. And here in Revelations you see, and my heart is for the nations, and to see that this is what we are doing. This is something we'll be doing for eternity. This was John's revelation.
Amen.
That we will stand before the throne, every nation, every tongue, every tribe. So if you're going to be doing this for eternity, might as well start now. You know. And why I work with internationals, and why we should all work with internationals, it's scriptural. The Bible cannot be properly understood apart from the roles of internationals. And I'll explain further. The next slide, please. And here we'll look at all the internationals that are mentioned in the Bible. If you actually take your Bible apart, from Abraham, Joseph, Daniel, Ruth, Ezekiel, Moses, Nehemiah, the nation of Israel, and even Jesus was an international. If you actually if you actually looked at your Bible, every international that's mentioned, so you really see God's heart for the nation. And I never so much thought about Jesus being an international until a few weeks ago. I met a Muslim girl, and she walked into this class. I was just sitting there thinking, God, are you sure this is something you want me to do? Support raising is slow. I don't really like the boonies. Are you sure? Did I hear you right? And right there, while I'm processing my thought and my doubts and entertaining it, right there, this girl walks in. She's covered, and we have a conversation. And I asked her where she's from. She said Jordan, and I thought that's rather strange because a lot of them come from usually Saudi or Iraq. I didn't think she was from Jordan. And then she tells me, so we start talking, and she asked me what I do. I said I teach ESL, but soon I'll be working full time with internationals. I'm trying to bridge the gap between internationals and Americans. And and right there she's just crying. She pulled a chair up. Maybe you can help me. And then she tells me how she was a refugee from Iraq. And she said she moved to Jordan and Jordan to the US. And she said every time she tells people she's from Iraq, no one will befriend her. And how she's lonely, she's scared. She said she doesn't know how the bus system works. They don't have the coin system. And this is the first time. She doesn't know how the grocery store works. So she's just telling me this whole thing, and she's like, I wish I had an American to just teach me how everything worked. And and we made friends, and she was just sharing with me her loneliness of being a refugee. She talked about the refugee camp in Jordan, and then she talked about coming here and just and she said you will never understand what it's like to be a refugee. And then I just I didn't think much about it. I walked her to her to her class, and I was just telling her I understand what it's like to be an international. You need friends, family. It's lonely, you make new friends, you make new family, but Christmas is not Christmas. It's not the same as how you have it back home. So I sort of tried to empathize with her. We talked, we walked away, and then when I came back, I felt, God, you couldn't have been any louder. The work I do is crucial because there's nothing in Dayton that actually bridges the internationals and the Americans. There's no Christian ministry out there doing it. And right there, he leads me to scripture, Matthew 2, verses 13 to 15, where it talks about the angel visiting Joseph to say, get up and leave Egypt. Get up and leave because Herod is after you. And just I was reading that few verses, and I just thought Jesus was a refugee. What does it mean? Get up and leave. It means, and they had to stay in Egypt till Herod passed away. And I was just thinking, we often read our Bibles, that two scriptures, and we don't think about it. But, I was just thinking, I cannot imagine I drive in the boonies at night and I'm afraid. I cannot imagine fleeing with a child, a young child, late at night, fearing for your life. And that was exactly what Joseph, Mary, and Jesus went through. And it just humbled me. It was just such a God moment where you just knew. I just felt the next time I see her, I'm going to talk to her and I'm going to tell her, I may not understand what it's like to be a refugee, but my Jesus was a refugee.
Amen.
We often glorify the cross, but we need to sort of analyze and study the human side of Jesus, and it's so powerful. So we have been in touch this whole week. It's their Muslim festival, and I'm waiting to go back and have more conversation with her and see where God will lead. I really want to lead her to the scripture. Can I see the next one? And they are some internationals stay in the nation, and some that are called to return home. and Moses returned home Nehemiah and the nation of Israel. So you'll encounter, and even just going around Houston, there's so many internationals living among you. And you have the world right here, in your backyard. The world has made tremendous progress since Jesus gave his Great Commission more than 2,000 years ago. And here in the slide, they show you the radar, the unreached people group, the green, maybe you can see. Much of the world has been exposed to the gospel. However, if you look at this next slide, this is the 1040 window, if you are aware of it. And the 1040 window is actually 10 degrees to 40 degrees north of the equator. And it's the nations that have yet to be evangelized. And a lot of them have little or no access to the gospel. A lot of them where it's illegal to send missionaries out there. And a lot of the people are lost. They are lost without Christ. There's no way to get in there into those nations. Can I see the next slide? And this is where you see all in the green is the Islamic nation. And the one in the pink, non-religious, Hinduism, Buddhism. And this is the world.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of them are not saved. But if I look at my next slide, at least 55 of the unevangelized countries, 97% of them have come to America. A lot of them are in the US now, pursuing higher education. 2/3 of the world population live here. Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and they are centered in the 1040 window. 90% of the people in the window are unevangelized. 1/25 or 25% of Christian mission giving is going to mission work here, and that's, for a Christian nation, that doesn't say much. Can I see the next one, Joy? And here, I just moved the globe to where Texas is, and the nations have come here. So you don't need to go far. The 1040 window, a lot of them have come to Texas. In fact, I made a few calls. Can I see the next slide? I made a few calls today, and about 3,000 students just to the University of Houston. University of Houston has about 3,000 international students, and they come from 137 nations.
Wow.
And a lot of them come from the Muslim world.
Wow.
And I come from the Muslim world. I have students in my classes, in my ESL classes. I have 100% Muslim students. And they are so hungry. They are very open to having God conversations. In fact, I usually tell my coworkers that are Christians, it's easier to have a God conversation with a Muslim because that's all they know. They are so religion and their identity is so intertwined. So it's so easy to have a God conversation with a Muslim than it is to have with an American. It's almost illegal to have a God conversation with an American. But with a Muslim, they are very open and they are just so hungry. In fact, was it last month I spent all day, and with the Muslim it's slower. You've got to build intentional friendships with them. They need to see that you're interested in them. So I spent all day with these 4 Muslim girls. In their country, they're not allowed to drive. From Saudi Arabia, the Muslim girls are not allowed to drive. They did nothing, so they just stayed home. The whole 4 months, they just did the university and the apartment and the grocery store, and that's it, 4 months. And so when I found out, I just felt so bad. So I took them out hiking. I spent all day with them. And the end of the night, we were just talking about different things, different faith. And they asked me, these 4 girls, they asked me, can we go to church with you tomorrow? And I was really, first, it took a while before I recovered. I didn't know, do I say yes? Do I say no? And in Malaysia, it's illegal for me to take a Muslim to church. It's illegal for me to evangelize to any Muslim. So even in this ministry, it's very risky because if one of them decide to just give my name to the embassy, it puts me in trouble, it puts my family in trouble. So, and that Sunday I was actually going to a different church to share my ministry, and I was trying to get locals involved to be host families. So I didn't, I've never been to this church, and I didn't know, and I usually don't bring an international church I've never been to. If they don't talk to me, they may not talk to the students, so I didn't know what to, But in that split second, I had to make that choice. Do I bring them? Yes, no? And so I said, sure, I'll take you to church. And the next day, and they were so excited. The next day, they were waiting downstairs, from their apartments. They were already waiting, so excited. They get in the car and they're like, do we look like Christians, But they had their heads carved, just so excited, And I sent like 50 people text messages, please be praying, I just don't know what to make out of it. There's 4 Muslim girls coming to church, and they wouldn't shake hand across gender, so they wouldn't shake hand with men. If the church had the meet and greet session, I did not know what, I just didn't know what to make out of the whole thing. So my co-worker comes with me, and I thought, well, between the two of us, we could push crowds, we could do crowd management. So we get there, and we are really praying. We get to the door, and I walk in, try to tell the usher, don't offer your hand, they wouldn't shake hand. So we come in, and we all sit there. It's hard to ignore. It's when you have a Muslim there, you bring in a Hindu, a Buddhist, you're not sure. They come in like any regular looking person. But when you bring in a Muslim, it's hard to ignore. You cannot scream any louder than this. This is where you need to get ready and do your mission field. And so we sit right at the door, actually. This woman comes running to us. She greets me, but she gets so excited talking to them, and she went on and on in Arabic. And I'm like, I walked into this random church, and there was this woman speaking Arabic. And she looked like an American. She was in her 70s, just on and on in Arabic. And then this church that I went to, they had 2 services, a contemporary and a traditional service. And this woman usually goes to the traditional. But the girls, when the music came on, they wanted to go to the contemporary, so she came right along with us. She sat right with us on the same seat throughout service. She translated for us. And the pastor was preaching on Joseph, which was Yusuf in the Quran. So the girls had no English, not much English, but they followed right along. At the end of the service, they spoke to people. But this woman, she didn't miss a beat. She used the stained glass window, and she explained to them the story of the Good Shepherd. And then she recited Psalms 23 in Arabic. So I just stepped out in obedience, and God met me right there. And he took it so much further than I could have ever done. Amen. Because who walks into an American church and meets a woman that speaks Arabic, and she does everything else. And then she gives me her card, and she says, I want to partner with your ministry. She's a Lebanese woman that has been in America 36 years. So, it was I just stepped out in obedience, and God took off from there. They have not come to church since because it's the fasting month, but I'm hoping to pick up with them after that, But it's just to see that when you step out in faith, He just meets you right there. You don't need to be capable, you don't need to know everything, you just need to be available. And you need to be willing, you need to be available, and He just takes off from there. So I'm just thinking, with all of you here, what I do is usually in Ohio, because that's where the university is at, but you have internationals among you. But the reason my focus is on international students is because they go back to their nations. Joy, can I see the next slide, please? And here, they are tomorrow's leaders. And if you look on the US government's website, this is on page 1 of 18. They list all the internationals that studied in the US that have gone home to their countries, and they are world leaders in their country. And these are some questions I was thinking. How many of them were exposed to the gospel while they were here? How many of them are leading their nation with biblical convictions? How many of them have come to Christ? How many of their countries persecute Christians? What might be different if at the very least, a seed was planted?
Amen.
So my focus is mainly to international students because a lot of them go back to their countries. They are world leaders in their countries. So if you get them while they are here, you save them while they are here, it's the easiest mission field because you don't need to learn another language, you don't need to fundraise, it's easy. They are going back, they pay to come here and they are going home. So it's their money, they speak the language, you don't need to learn a new language. Spanish is hard, can you imagine? And it's an easy ministry to do. Can I see the next slide? And it's an easy ministry, if you sled, you make food, whatever, you can do this ministry. As long as you can speak. All international wants is to make a friendship. And I think, if you struggle in your Spanish and you find it difficult, can you imagine they come with no English and you just get a glimpse of how they feel. They come and you're going on and on and on in your English and it's too much for them. It's tiring. If 1 hour of Spanish you felt drained, you try staying 24 hours in a foreign language. It's tiring. It's so draining. And that's what, we make them go through. Can I see the next? Yeah, go on. So this is the vision of IFI, is we serve internationals and partner with them to make Christ known among the nations. So, this is the ministry I do, this is the ministry I'm a part of, and because we see it as, it's right here, it's right, they willingly come here. And the different things we do is, IFI has now become a mission sending ministry. We have one in Sudan, a guy that came to the US, he got saved, he's now in Sudan. We have one in Japan, and we have one girl in China. And they've all been really, and the IFI pastor actually goes and visits in these different nations once a year. So, in fact, when I first planted IFI in Wright State, I was the only one, and people thought I was crazy. You're going to, why don't you join an existing ministry? Why do you want to plant? And I just thought, someone needs to work among internationals there. There's nothing. Wright State has 1,500 internationals with no Christian ministry in there at all. No InterVarsity, no Campus Crusade. They have Campus Crusade, but none of them were reaching internationals. Their needs are different. You can't come with them and speak grace, sanctified, glorified. Nothing's going to go through. You need simple, easy Bible study. And I met this woman at a fundraising dinner, and she happens to teach at my university. We just bumped into each other, and her story was she got saved 22 years ago through this ministry when she first came from Japan, and now she's a professor at my university. And so when I told her I was planting, I couldn't get any Christian. It was really sad. None, I worked with Christians. None of them offered to be my faculty advisor. The Christians were, none of them offered to be my faculty advisor. And this Japanese lady said, I'm a product of this ministry. I will sign whatever paper, just plant it, because I'm alive, that is changed. My daughter is back in Japan. She's serving with the tsunami work that's still being done. So she was just so excited. If you will plant this, I will take full responsibility. I'll sign whatever paper. We will get this started. So, just starting it by myself, I've just seen God just bring different people. Recently, I was blessed with a woman who I just met. She gave me her home. She has a pool. She has a wall. She's like, you can use my house every Friday for Bible study. And she was a random lady I met just for the first time. And she has no kids. She built a home for ministry, and she gave it up. So I've just for me, I felt like I've just stepped out in obedience, and God met me right there, one door after the next. I'm not sure I need to raise 40,000 in order to plant the ministry for next year, but I'm just, if God raised 20,000 for school, I'm believing he can double the amount. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns the cattle. He owns the hills. I just know he'll do it.
Amen.
And I've been claiming every international. They're coming in next week. And I'm just excited to see where God will take this ministry.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.